Good evening and welcome. My name is Anna Maria Rapetti. I'm Chief Development Officer at UT Health San Antonio, and I'd like to welcome all of you to our Forefront series here in Austin. How many of you are alumni? Oh my gosh, yeah. We have over 50,000 alumni now from all of our 6 schools, more than 5,000 of you all here in Austin area. So we're thrilled to be able to do some programming and bring some of our fabulous researchers here. Tonight's audience will be introduced to you in just a second by Dr. Jennifer Potter, but I want to first introduce to you Dr. John Howe, who was one of our former UT Health presidents. I don't know if he was there when any of you were in school, but good evening, Dr. Howe, and welcome to the Forefront series. All right, I'd like to introduce now my colleague, who's the Senior Vice President for Research at UT Health San Antonio, Dr. Jennifer Potter, who will be our moderator this evening. Welcome, Jennifer.
Thank you so much for coming. As Anna Maria said, I'm Jennifer Potter. I'm very proud to serve as the Vice President for Research at UT Health San Antonio. And the people that you're going to be hearing from today are the reason why we do what we do. Let me start by introducing our panelists, but I guess I just want to mention one thing. One of the things that's been so transformative about the Department of Neurology and the Biggs Institute is I was touring the other day and listening to all the work that's going on, and I thought, my goodness, as I was telling Mary Henrich, I was talking about the fact that, my goodness, we have really transformed into a global leader in the work that is done at UT Health with centers of excellence and cutting-edge innovative research and treatment for Alzheimer's disease. And it's really important that we all recognize what has happened at UT Health San Antonio as a result of the people that you'll be hearing from this evening. So I'm honored to introduce Dr. Carlane Jackson. Dr. Carlane Jackson earned her bachelor's degree in chemical engineering at Texas A&M I'm not going to date her. Her medical degree at UT Health Science Center, and subsequently completed her residency in neurology and a clinical fellowship in neurophysiology. I know she's going to talk a little bit about her background, so I will just leave it at she is our chair of neurology, and the work that she has done is truly extraordinary. I'm also very proud to introduce Dr. Sudha Seshadri. Dr. Seshadri completed her medical education and residency training in internal medicine and neurology at Christian Medical College, Vellore, the Madras Medical College, Chennai, and I hope I pronounced that correctly, and the All India Institute of Medical Sciences in New Delhi. She later completed a second residency at Boston University, along with a fellowship in the neurobiology of aging and neuroepidemiology at the University of Massachusetts Medical Center in Worcester. She was involved in a very famous study, the Framingham Heart Study, if you're familiar with that, a transformative study to learn about human health. She is a behavioral neurologist and the Robert Barker Distinguished University Professor of Neurology, Psychiatry, Cellular and Integrative Physiology at the Long School of Medicine. And she'll tell you a little bit more about herself as well. And then finally, Dr. A. Campbell Sullivan, an Associate Professor of Neurology and Board-Certified Clinical Neuropsychologist, and I hope she'll tell you all what a clinical neuropsychologist is, at the Biggs Institute for Alzheimer's and Neurodegenerative Diseases at UT Health Science Center. And I'm going to leave it at that because I want to make sure we have time for all the questions. I do just want to acknowledge, as I look at this group, just how much the impact there has been. And I think of Dr. Campbell Sullivan, who, when she joined us, has really worked and developed and matured her career with the stewardship and mentorship of the 2 people sitting with her. And so you're just going to be able to hear a lot about that. So let's go ahead, and as I'm joining you up there, I want us to ask Dr. Jackson for a question for you. So we've been talking, and I heard people talking in the audience or seeing some of the squeezy brains over there and saying brain health. So could you tell us a little bit what we mean by brain health and why this term is becoming so popular?
Sure. So it's an excellent question. I just finished my 2-year term as president of the American Academy of Neurology. It's 40,000 members worldwide. And as a board of directors, we decided to have a brain health committee, and we realized we didn't have a definition of brain health. So we got to have all these really super smart people, and we get them together, and it takes 6 months to come up with a definition of brain health. But there's some parts of the definition that I think are really important for everyone to understand. And the definition is somewhat long, and I may have to refer to my notes. But I want to point out some really important things. First, it's the continuous attaining and maintaining optimal neurologic function that best supports one's physical, mental, and social well-being throughout the life expectancy. So it's not something that we think about when we get old. It's something that starts when we conceive a child, and it's something that we need to advocate for throughout the life spectrum. I also want to emphasize that brain health isn't just about cognitive function. Brain health is preventive strategies to optimize brain function. And so in neurology, we at the Center of Brain Health will have programs for headache, traumatic brain injury, migraines. We'll have peripheral neuropathy, muscular dystrophy, Parkinson's disease, epilepsy. So it's not just a center for cognitive function, it's a center for any neurologic disease. And not to stress you out, but recent studies have suggested globally that 1 in 3 individuals at some point in their life will suffer from a neurologic disorder. So it's something that will impact everybody in this room and certainly everyone in South Texas.
Thanks for that.
You're welcome.
So dementia is a term that more of us know. It's more familiar to all of us. And yet there's so much more than that. So tell us a little bit, Dr. Seshadri, about what do we think of now as dementia, and how does that extend to Alzheimer's and beyond?
So you heard a definition of brain health. And when brain health deteriorates, a syndrome that we describe as dementia. So dementia is the loss of some memory, other cognitive thinking ability, behavioral and emotional control, to the extent that one is not able to do what one wishes to do. There is a stage before it reaches the stage of affecting life functions where there could be difficulty with these cognitive abilities. These include things like remembering, things like planning, things like being aware of space and how to get to different places, knowing how to manipulate things, understanding and communicating, perceiving things. These are all thinking abilities. Now, when these are affected, or one or more of them is affected, but you're compensating by using others, that is a stage that we call mild cognitive impairment. And sometimes if only the person themselves knows about it, we call it subjective cognitive impairment. And really that's the stage at which we want everybody to consult their doctor, because that's when you can stop things, slow down things, and keep people from ever moving into dementia. And in the last few years, we have some new, even FDA-approved treatments that can be given in mild cognitive impairment to slow down the progression. So this is a very exciting time to be a neurologist, and an exciting time and place to be a neurologist looking at dementia and all the different causes of dementia. You mentioned Alzheimer's. So we define some of the causes of dementia today by what we see in the brain, either after the person dies or during life using sophisticated imaging or fluid biomarkers. So if they have too much of amyloid and tau, we call this Alzheimer. If they have too much of another protein called alpha-synuclein, this is the same thing that accumulates in Parkinson's disease, but can go into the other parts of the brain and cause something called dementia with Lewy bodies. If they have a lot of trouble with the blood supply to the brain, resulting in little strokes or silent vascular, and then there are some other conditions that are less common or that are mostly seen in older people. But there are at least 15, 20 causes. And again, important to know that several of these causes are reversible. That's another reason to come during the stage of mild cognitive impairment, because in somebody it may be a thyroid problem, it may be an autoimmune encephalitis, it may be something that's treatable so that it does not have to progress to dementia.
Dr. Chaudhry, I'm curious, what was it, because you joined us relatively recently, what was it about San Antonio? What drew you to San Antonio as the place to do the work that you love so much?
I was quite happily ensconced in Boston. As Dr. Henrich used to say, I had a number of grants, but somebody reached out to me and talked about this transformational vision that was emerging in South Texas. And this was something that intrigued me. So I came and saw the sort of, that this was not a strategic decision. It was not something that, because now people are funding Alzheimer's, let's go into Alzheimer's. This was something that came with a deep commitment, a sort of willingness to think big. I discovered those things that make Texas special, that this is where the moon launch came from. That day, Dr. Henrich came, he had a mask on, but you could see in his eyes the excitement. And I said something that, there were many of the pieces. This was a place where we had a wonderful Veterans Administration hospital. We already had excellent research into aging in the Barshop Institute with the Pepper Center and the Nathan Schock Center. We had the excellent ALS clinic. We had, San Antonio was the place where in the 90s, some of the most pioneering work on stroke prevention was done. And that there was, so much was there. And I said, I think we could get an Alzheimer's center in a year. And he said, this is music to my ears. What can I do? How can we make this happen? And then I did get to meet Ann Biggs. She's 90-something, but wow. I got to meet Ann Biggs, and I was taken to dinner at La Fonda on Main. And I think the combination of the city, the friendliness of the city, the can-do attitude and spirit. My husband actually, he was in Boston still, so I was a little hesitant. He said, you know what? When you see an opportunity like this, you should take it. The people of San Antonio, because they loved Glenn Biggs, because they believed in the university, had gathered over 40 million. So although there was no Alzheimer clinic at that point, they had put together everything. My colleague, Dr. Bray, who was she was a chair for both of us, she had put together this vision that included things like, okay, insurance may not pay for it, but we will have a 1 million patient care fund so that we can do what needs to be done. So this kind of thoughtfulness that had gone into it over the 3 years, even before I was asked to visit, it felt like the opportunity of a lifetime. It felt like this is what I was meant to do. My mother developed a devastating illness when she was about 4 years old. When I was about 4 years old, she was 23. And by the time I was about 9 years old, she could no longer speak. She would sort of, her writing was all scrawly, and she had, and I would try to put in plays or do some things to get her attention. So I grew up learning about the brain. I knew I wanted to be a neurologist or some brain researcher, something like that, by the time I finished high school. And in Boston, I was doing well, but this felt like this is what I had been building towards. And so I'm very glad the last 7 years have been wonderful. Dr. Sullivan was one of the people who interviewed me when, on one of my visits. And even before, once I had accepted, I think the day after, she calls me with a colleague, Dr. Parker, who had joined, I think, a week ago, and say, we want to do this mind clinic. We want to do neurology and neuropsychology together at one visit, so people don't have to come 2 times. You just say, okay, and we'll start it even before you come. True story.
And I would be remiss in saying, Suda may have said no strategy, but I remember, and Dr. Henrich, I will not do this story justice, but Dr. Henrich, Bill Henrich, our beloved former president, walked down the hall and presented this multi-page vision of exactly what Suda was going to do. So Dr.
2 days after I came,
Yes.
I sent it to him.
It turned us around, and he came and he said, we got to do this. We're going to get this done. And we're reaming through these pages and pages of this extraordinary vision that's been realized in San Antonio. Dr. Sullivan, you too have a personal connection to the work. Tell us how that, if you're willing, I've heard you talk about it before, how it shapes the work that you do.
Absolutely. So, my work I first got interested in the aging brain sort of early in my graduate education. And I was at sort of a leading academic medical institute, UCS, University of California in San Francisco. And there I was exposed to patients who had very rare and sort of atypical forms of dementia and neurodegenerative disease, which I'd never seen before. And it was just fascinating to see how there were subtle nuances in disease presentation and how that would change diagnosis and inform treatment and, really helped families. Because a lot of these, weren't your typical older adults with Alzheimer's disease. And it became personal for me when my father started to show some symptoms of what I thought was a frontotemporal dementia syndrome. And so he was having some behavioral changes, his judgment was a little bit off, he was losing some of his, manners, a little less decor, and he was also having changes in his movement and his motor function. And we never got a formal diagnosis. He unfortunately died when I started my fellowship. And, I wasn't able to get the diagnosis, but his clinical syndrome really stayed with me. And then I was reminded of that story within the last year when my aunt, so his youngest sister, started to show symptoms that were very similar to him. And so through the work of the BIGS with my colleagues and mentors, we were able to just get my aunt formally diagnosed with a familial form of ALS, so Lou Gehrig's disease, with frontotemporal dementia. And so turns out there is a very rare variant or genetic mutation in our family that if you are a carrier and you live long enough, you will start to manifest symptoms of ALS. Some family members have the FTD on top of that, some do not. And so I've been working with my family over this last year to try and help educate them, because this is a very nuanced, very niche part of neurology and neuropsychology. I'm one of a handful of neuropsychologists who really has expertise in both FTD and ALS. And to have it in my family is just mind-blowing. And I think it's been a lot of reflection over the past year and just, reinforced why I do what I do and how grateful I am to be doing this work in this place with these people. So,
and if I may say, your father would be so proud of the fact that you head up the All FTD Frontotemporal Dementia Center at San Antonio. You made that happen. When I was joining here 2018, I went to an NIH conference and they said, Hispanics don't really get frontotemporal dementia. I said, we haven't looked. Dr. Sullivan is going to be publishing a paper with nearly 150 people.
Yeah. And now, we have a seat at the table. And now they're starting to recognize that, this disease does happen sort of all across, ethnicities and families, and it's much more prevalent and it's under-recognized. And I think, that's why I love what I do, is because I think neuropsychology, it allows us to sort of look at the nuances in disease presentation and diagnose and identify things that might otherwise be missed. And that's what we hear a lot, is it can take many years from symptom onset to diagnosis for ALS clinic, for just any dementia syndrome in general, but especially those that are really just poorly recognized, poorly understood in the community. And we're now bringing that global expertise to Central and South Texas. And that's one of the reasons I came here, was the promise of the BIGS. And it's been more than I ever could have imagined, so. very happy with my decision.
So remember that we're global now.
Yeah, we are.
You know, it's often the case that we think of scientists and physicians and psychologists as professionals, and we forget that this work can be so deeply personal and it informs what we do. I don't know for you, Dr. Jackson, how you became a neurologist, or were there any stories there as well?
Yeah, so I, as you heard, went to Texas A&M and then fell in love with my husband, who was in dental school at the Health Science Center. So I came to the Health Science Center for love, probably not knowing exactly what I was doing.
We'll take that.
But I stayed for love, too, because I love the institution and the culture that's created there. But we had our first child when I was an intern, and I got pregnant 15 months later, and I had our second child. And our second child, out of his 1-month visit, still wasn't smiling. And, you know, I had just done my pediatric neurology rotation, so I'm looking for all the milestones, and he just wasn't meeting any of them. And so, long story short, you know, 8 months later, after a lot of testing, he started to have these shaking spells where he would cry out. And ended up taking him to a neurologist who diagnosed him with a chromosomal disorder and a syndrome called infantile spasms, which is associated with very severe epilepsy. And so, you know, this is my first year of neurology residency. We're taking my son to speech pathologist, physical therapist, occupational therapist. He had a geneticist. He had Francisco Figueroa did his feeding tube as he couldn't swallow. We had the neurologist. You know, it was overwhelming, his care, and everything was disjointed. Every therapist was in a different location with a different health record. Nobody integrated his care in any way. And so when I finished my neurology residency and started becoming interested in ALS, I said, we've got to fix this. We have to develop a model of care in which a family can bring their loved ones to a team and have everything addressed in a single visit. So in 1996, we became the first certified center in South Texas for ALS, and we continue we now care for over 300 patients and families with ALS in this multidisciplinary model. So thank you. So kind of fast forward, about 4 years ago, Dr. Bry comes up to me, knocks on the door, could you be the interim chair of neurology? I'm retiring. And within literally several months, my mother was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, my father was diagnosed with Lewy body dementia, and here I am again with all of these responsibilities and caregiving burdens. But we have the Biggs Institute now, and so I immediately got in with Dr. Parker and Neela Patel, the geriatrician who saw my mom today and makes home visits. But it's so wonderful to see from a caregiver, family perspective, the difference in care that my son received versus what is now being able to be offered in our facility. So when I became the chair, I was like, this is really cool. I love my ALS clinic. I love what we're doing with cognitive dysfunction, but why can't we extrapolate this model of care to all neurologic diseases? Why can't we do this traumatic brain injury with multiple sclerosis, with migraine headaches? And so that's our evolving vision, is how to use this Center for Brain Health to develop those models of care for all neurologic disease.
So that's a great transition to this vision of this Center for Brain Health. And I'd love to hear, Dr. Seshadri, the vision as you were programming the building. What do you see this becoming, and how will it be transformative for the region and beyond?
I think, as you heard with all of us, we did not see ourselves as, this is not a building for a specialist to talk to a patient or family. This is a partnership. We've tried to build it thinking of what our families have told us they need, what our patients have told us they need, and bringing together in that one space everybody, regardless of the department, that regardless of whether this is paid for by Medicare or Medicaid, or whether this is something that we have to fund through grants or philanthropy, we just said, what do people need? So on the first floor as you enter, there's a multidisciplinary clinic where a neurologist, a psychiatrist, a geriatrician, palliative care, physical therapy, occupational therapy, respiratory therapy, dietitian, genetic counseling, psychological counseling, speech counseling, swallowing, nutrition, everything will be available in that space. And then one day this may be for people with Parkinson's, another day this may be for people with ALS or dementia. On the same building, brain function is not just cognition. So we have the ability to assess how somebody is walking, how somebody is, the vision, the hearing. Hearing is one of the big factors that may be accelerating dementia, unknown or uncorrected hearing loss. We have the ability to test balance, smell, sensation, autonomic function, with COVID and things. So this is a place where, and we are all next to each other. So if somebody needs to have a nerve conduction study for pain and need to have memory testing for cognition and needs to have an imaging of the brain with the best possible imaging that can see even the tiny structures that are responsible for things like Parkinson's disease and blood pressure problems. We have the 7 Tesla MR. We have a PET CT that tells you what the proteins are during life. We have a mock apartment. This is something that a typical clinic doesn't have. But we said, we want our patient and care partner to say, this is what is difficult for me. And then have the occupational therapist stand there or the physical therapist be there and say, okay, this is what we might do differently. 50% of our dementia patients continue to get care at home. And so because that's where they need it, that's where we'll be. And so this is the vision, and this is what we want you to partner with us to sort of see what is needed, make that available. We have a music therapy room. We have an art therapy room. We have a large room where people can do line dancing or any type. Dancing really helps with Parkinson's disease and other things. And even with maintaining cognition, there was a big study in the New England Journal that dancing maintains your brain health. So we have a library of resources. We will start it off, but if our patient says, this was really helpful to me, we'll keep a copy of it there. We have a space for meditation, a calming room, places where caregivers can meet and have a caregiver support group, while in the next room, we have professionals who will look after their loved one. We have infusion space, pharmacy, laboratory, all there, so that you don't have to go to 5 different places. And across the bridge, you can go to the cardiology and everything else. And this was very important to President Henrich. If you cross one more bridge, you can go to the dental school and get the dental. And that's not just because they are both common things. We now recognize that dental health and the microbiome in your mouth may be something that's important for maintaining brain health as well. So we had put a lot of thought into it. We meet, I think, at least 5-6 times every week, planning every detail of it, arguing back and forth to have the best experience. We'd love for you to come visit, share your ideas, and support us in this partnership.
Thanks, Dr. Seshadri. So Dr. Sullivan, as a psychologist, I'm curious how the Center for Brain Health will support your research and other scientists that are embedded in this. We've talked about the patient experience. I'm curious about the research component.
So the thing I love about the Center for Brain Health is it's a truly integrated model of care that I really haven't seen others do. I've been to a lot of academic medical centers, and some are great at research, and some are great at clinical care, and some are great at education, and we're striving to be amazing at all of it. And so I think that is really important. And so what we're doing is we're inviting everyone to come sit at the table. And so when we have patients come in or families come in, they have their appointments, and they might learn how to help someone transfer, but also we're going to talk to them about research opportunities. And if they're interested, we are happy to have them participate. And so we want to have studies that are available to everyone. So not just Alzheimer's, not just vascular dementias, but also, what we're talking about with hearing and walking and looking at sort of early indicators of cognitive change, clinical trials. So if you have a familial form of an Alzheimer's dementia, we want to involve you in a clinical trial. I think there's a lot of opportunity for research, but my role is, especially given my family history, is I want to make sure that there is space and we're holding space for individuals who have rare or atypical forms of dementia, especially with young onset dementias. And I think that is important because if we can study and understand these familial forms of dementia, I think we're going to unlock some keys that are going to be helpful for all types of dementia. And so I think that is going to be really important. So as Sudha likes to say, we want to have a trial for anyone who walks through the door. Caregivers, we're getting a lot of adult children or individuals who are at risk of a familial dementia, but maybe are not yet symptomatic. Like my cousins, they're at risk because of their aunt. They're 25 years old. And so they were the first to sign me up. I'll be coming here for the next 40 years. So we're going to start building these cohorts and following these individuals and hopefully coming to them with really promising disease-modifying treatments. So
it's interesting. It reminds me almost of a cancer center. We think of cancer, and when someone is diagnosed, part of the conversation is often, is there a clinical trial that might help if something isn't working? And so in some ways, the quality of care is improved when you have access to clinical trials as options as part of the treatment. Is that a fair way to characterize it?
Absolutely. And right from the beginning, our Alzheimer's Center said care and research are going to be integrated. We're going to make this, as you said, a trial for everybody where we don't have a cure. And all the Alzheimer's centers, I'm in a 3-person executive committee for the 35 ADRCs all across the country.
And an ADRC is?
That is an Alzheimer's Disease Research Center of Excellence. And we became one in 2021 September. That's about 3 years after I got here. And thanks to the great teamwork.
Which I will say is about 7 years before anyone thought we could get an ADRC.
It's unheard
and that's
of.
Thanks to it is a huge accomplishment.
That's been awesome. And this spring in San Francisco on May 5th and 6th, we're going to be discussing how the network of ADRCs need to be more like the cancer centers, sort of more like what we are already doing, where we can not only give these cutting-edge treatments, but even if they are FDA approved, we continue to understand as more and more people take them. How safe are they? Are they unexpected side effects?
So, and this is probably for everyone. What do you think is important for the community to know as we talk about brain health, as we talk about dementia? What is it that the community can be doing to elevate these issues, to be talking about it, to contribute or to make an impact? And this is really for everybody.
Yeah. Number one, be advocates for brain health. We can't do it as professionals by ourselves, or our professional organizations can't advocate. We need a grassroots efforts for all patients to get involved. Encourage your congressman, anyone you know, the importance of brain health and brain health legislation. Two, as you know, without neuroscience, without research, we will never make progress on these diseases. And certainly the federal government provides some funding for research, but it's not nearly enough. I have so many young faculty who would love to spend time doing research, and they simply don't have the funding to do the projects that they have in mind. And we just need pilot funds just to get them started so they can get some preliminary data to apply for those bigger grants. And third, we've talked about this multidisciplinary concept, and I think you guys get it, but there is so much infrastructure that is not supported by insurance, it's not supported by the state, it's not supported by the Health Science Center, and we really depend on partners such as yourself to help support those things. So nurse coordinators, medical assistants to answer the phone and return your calls, genetic counselors, social workers, those are all people on my team that are supported by philanthropy. They're not supported through anything I can do to generate revenue. People come to me all the time who have no insurance and still need the care. They need wheelchairs, they need walkers, they need simple things that we need support to help provide. So our community, our South Texas community, without your support, we can't do this. Can't do it by ourselves.
Thanks. Other thoughts about community input and output?
A few things. One, of course, right across, very close to here, the Texas legislature is considering something that will be transformative and will establish, along with the attitude and knowledge that's available here, Texas is a leader worldwide in dementia. This is the DPRIT bill, where as Texas has done for cancer, Texas has had a transformative role, so many Nobel Prizes in cancer research. More importantly, diseases like melanoma and lymphoma that were not curable, that are now curable. We are hoping that if this DPRIT bill, which is proposed to set aside about $3 billion to spend over 10 years to the most worthy causes, bringing the brightest minds here. Just in the last month, we have had 4 brilliant people from all over the world come and express interest in moving here, but they need to move their team so they continue to be as successful as they were at the previous place, and that takes startups, and things like DPRIT can do that. Once it passes the legislature, it goes before all of you for a constitutional amendment in the voting booth in November. And if that happens, this will be something very special. I also want to say that we talk about providing studies, but no studies are successful without the patients, the healthy people at risk, and the families that make that time to be part of that study. I know it's not easy, but there are amazing people who do it. We have a biobank, and over 1,600 people have donated blood or spinal fluid. Sometimes when we are doing it for clinical testing, they say, okay, you can store it here, and people all over the world can study it. We have over 400 South Texans who have donated a brain, and we have these fancy techniques where the information gets on slides that are called digital pathology. So one of my colleagues has taken over as executive director of the Paris Brain Institute. I was there last week, and they will do digital slides. We will do digital slides. People anywhere in the world, somebody, you don't know, some young budding researcher somewhere is going to see something that others haven't seen. So we recognize what a precious gift it is when people give of their time, give of themselves to try and find answers. So we need your ideas, we need your partnership. And I've not found it wanting at all. I found it so generously provided. Cannot tell you how grateful I am.
I will echo that, because I think as sort of mid-career faculty, I am someone who has really benefited from a lot of these programs and a lot of the generosity in the community. I mean, I was awarded a sort of a seed grant that helped spawn not one, but I think 3 huge programs just from that one very generous gift from Lisa Bailey. But I've also benefited from some of the grants that come to our patient care fund. My aunt, because of her dementia that no one really recognized, started making some really poor choices and lost her insurance funding. And so we didn't have a way to get her a workup, but because we have special funds for underinsured or uninsured persons, we were able to get this workup and subsequently get this diagnosis. So I guess my final message is just don't discount the reach of your gift. It's so unbelievably generous, and we are grateful for it, but it can go so far further than you, I think, could ever imagine. So
I can't thank the 3 of you enough for your time and your perspective. We're going to go to questions, but I just want everyone to give a round of applause to you. Thank you so much for your time. So we do have time for questions now. There are some folks with microphones, and we're happy to answer those questions.
My question is about the legislative stuff that's in the works. What is the name of that, and what would we be able to ask our legislature, ask our people about?
Sure. It is called the Dementia Prevention Research Institute of Texas, or DPRIT, very similar to the Cancer Prevention Research Institute of Texas, and it's Senate Bill 5, and there's a corresponding House Bill, I don't know the number, 5, and House Bill 5 as well.
So just for your awareness, the way that this would work, like CPRIT, and if you had voted when CPRIT was on, there, if it comes out of the legislature, and this is just for your awareness, you will have an opportunity as a voter in Texas to vote yay or nay to support this. And the funds are used to support both career development as well as fundamental research projects. I have to say nationally, CPRIT has had an extraordinary impact on cancer as well as the science of cancer in Texas. And so the premise behind this is that we could have that same transformative legacy for Texas of leading to these innovative changes, quality of care, access, treatment, all of these things. And it's really an opportunity for Texas to lead the nation and the world global on these issues. And that's why it's so important to be watching this legislation.
It'll also provide infrastructure, like we talked about PET scans. Now, PET scans use isotopes that are synthesized in these big machines called cyclotrons, and they need to be given very quickly. So we have a cyclotron, but not every place does. And not, we could use more than one. This one is 12 years old. So those sorts of things which clearly help with diagnosis. When we do this new amyloid treatment, we need the cyclotron and the PET scan to show that you have amyloid in the brain, and then later to see if the treatment has taken away the amyloid in the brain. So those sorts of infrastructure as well will be something that DIPRIT will help build.
That's a great point. Thank you. I see two people. There.
I often get emails from like the Texas Nurses Association or the Nurse Practitioner Association asking me to contact congressmen about bills. And it is so easy. You click here, you put your zip code, it generates a letter, and it tells your voting person to vote for what you want. Can you do that this alumni group is a huge email target.
So we are state employees. This is very boring.
So
But
we
that's why
can't tell you
advocates
to
and
do that.
allies are so important out of respect for our role as state employees. We do not lobby, but it is great. We are always happy to educate, inform, explain, and we would be delighted for people to exercise those options. Thank you. That was my very official answer.
Yeah, but there are patient associations that do send action alerts. So the American Academy of Neurology sends action alerts. So there are other opportunities. So I guess the mantra would be to engage if you get those and you agree with what they're asking for.
And so when we talk about what the community can do who's interested, that's why we're providing this education. We see a question over here, and I also, right there too. And then we'll go to you.
First of all, thank you very much from all of us for what you're doing for all of us. We're so grateful for what you're doing. But my question to you is, why is this predominantly affecting women?
Brain health.
Alzheimer's and dementia is predominantly affecting women.
Sure, yes. And there seem to be many reasons. We don't understand all of them, but getting that answer could help. We know that one reason is that women live longer. They're less likely to die of things like heart disease, but that's just a small part of it. We know that the menopause seems to be bad for the brain in some ways. We did a big study where we showed that a premenopausal woman of the same age have the same amount of the bad protein tau in the brain. But you see, take a postmenopausal woman and man of the same age, and the woman has more tau than expected at that same age. So there seems to be some things where the same set of genes in the environment of a woman seems to make her more vulnerable. There are some things that happen, for instance, when we have pregnancies that can result in eclampsia, pregnancy-induced hypertension, or pregnancy-related diabetes that can have effects 10, 20, 30 years later in making the vessels more vulnerable. So, but we don't understand completely how to correct this. And those answers are going to benefit women and men. So that was a very good question, and that's one of the areas we are doing a lot of research on.
Yeah, so I will say, all of these, the 33 ADRC, so the Alzheimer's Disease Research Centers across the country, every few years, they come up with a new battery and a new protocol and new questions that they're going to ask. And this is, for all of their participants who come in annually. And this most recent edition that's rolling out right now has an entirely new section just asking about perimenopause and menopausal symptoms in women. And I think this is something that researchers now are going to start to study on a larger scale, so we can start to answer some of these questions. So very important, something I am very interested in. So.
Thanks, Dr. Sullivan. We have a question over here. Hi.
Rob Moore, MD class 2010. Now, I'm an emergency physician, so please try to use small words and short sentences so I can understand what you say. But unfortunately, my mom was diagnosed with Alzheimer's about 3 months ago. We put her on Aricept, and she's shown some good improvements, and now we're having the Leqembi conversation. My question is to y'all, but actually specifically to you. It seems like the monoclonal antibodies clear out the beta amyloid, but the patient improvements seem, the patient-oriented outcomes are modest. Are you going to put your mom on a monoclonal antibody, if you're comfortable talking about that?
Yeah.
And are any of the other new emerging monoclonal antibodies that you're doing research on showing better efficacy than Leqembi?
So from a personal perspective, my mom has more advanced Alzheimer's at this point, so she would not be a good candidate for that treatment, but,
Yeah. So clearly the impact is not, it's modest, very modest, about 5-6 months worth of slowing. But we think what will be needed would be a cocktail of medications like we do in people with cancer. So simultaneous with administering Leqembi or Kisunla, we are testing out tau medications, anti-inflammatory medications, medications that affect the endosomal lysosomal pathway. There are medications that are interventions, gamma wave entrainment with sound and light. We are doing some fornical stimulation. So there is probably going to need to be an understanding of everything that's happening in the brain and addressing each of that. The average person with dementia does not have just one cause for their dementia. It is often a combination of Alzheimer's, vascular, 30% of the time dementia with Lewy bodies, another 30% of the time something called late, that is limbic age-associated TDP-43 encephalopathy. So this is something that represents the difference between the resilience in the brain and many pathologies. So there are newer generation, but I suspect amyloid alone will not be the answer.
And don't forget the simple things. Be sure she's socially engaged. Be sure she's exercising. Be sure she's eating healthy. Be sure she doesn't have a sleep disorder that needs to be addressed.
Exactly.
Some of the most simplest interventions we don't have a randomized controlled trial to prove, but we know are impactful.
And she can hear.
Yes. And check her hearing, yes, absolutely.
I'm Jimmy McMichael. I was in the first graduating class in 1970. I'm almost as old as you. When I arrived in San Antonio in 1968, the county was not yet open. We were still at the Robert B. Greene. Even after the county opened, reflecting back 55 years ago, it was a primitive deal. In the way the medical school, the health science center has matured, brings tears to my eyes. And I want to say thank you.
Thank you.
That means more than you can know for all the people at UT Health every day who work so hard and are so committed. Our new hospital that's just recently established and the bridge that connects it to our cancer center. It was a joyous day, and it just, from the bottom of our hearts, thank you so much. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
So I am not a student and I'm not a plant either, but
Wait, can I give you a microphone?
sure, that's fine. Yeah, microphone. Thank you so much for the talk. It's been really moving to hear about all the exciting things happening at UT Health. I echo yours. I was just about tearing up. You should be very proud. I'm thinking about the future, though, and I'm curious about what you are most excited about for the future of brain health, just looking ahead, and what do you need to get there? What can we do to help you?
I think we all have a wish list. I think some of the things I'm very excited about, building on this theme of diagnosing everything and providing precision prevention, diagnosis, and care. We have a very smart genetic counselor. Unfortunately, her time in Texas is not paid unless it's only the time that the physician and the genetic counselor spend together. But we are planning to bring that kind of testing as routine care along with all the other kinds of testing, not just whether you have one gene, but some people, like for diabetes, have 20 or 30 genes which have small effects, either protective or bad. So creating these polygenic risk scores and then being able to offer people combinations of drugs. You know, I think Dr. Sullivan, for instance, when she diagnoses these very rare conditions, we have a neurologist, Dr. Tanner, who personally is developing a medication for a very rare childhood condition. So you can have these targeted treatments for those who have rare things, and you can have these more global efforts, particularly at prevention. But exercise may benefit one person more, one person's brain more, and a certain diet might help another person's brain more. We don't completely understand the reasons for these differences, but for instance, there's a gene called BDNF, and if you have one variant, exercise helps your memory more. So this kind of refined diagnosis, not with a shotgun, one size fits all, is something that I think will transform dementia care in the next 5 years.
So Dr. Seshadri, if you weren't picking up, just identified about 10 pilot studies.
Yes.
Many of which might actually be able to inform policy. For example, the ability for insurance to reimburse a genetic counselor absent a physician. So that's the type, when we are talking about how the science, beyond even the question in the scientist's mind, can actually be funded so that we can get the preliminary data to build the research that goes on to change how policy affects and impacts care. Is that a
And
fair
building
way?
on that, you know, Ms. Bailey, for instance, has every year she funds something that then becomes a big grant, because grant funders want preliminary data, particularly if it's an out-of-the-box idea. You know, or we have these big ventures like the NUN study. We have 800. So right now, we are putting all those records in a digital form so that in 2026, we can invite researchers from all over the world and say, you can do research wherever you are. This is what it is. This is the commitment of nuns who, over the last 30 plus years, were seen every year, donated their brain. But nobody, the grant, I can't ask for an NIH grant just to digitize the records that they kept painstakingly over a lifetime. But that gift can make this a source of so much new knowledge. So this sort of pilot partnership is something that, thank you.
So we're at the end of our time. I think we're going to be sticking around for a little bit, but I have to say I've done several of these Forefront series on many different topics, and for some reason tonight, thank you, Austin. This has been very intimate, what you shared, sir, And what you've talked about in all of this is incredible, because the partnership that all of you talked about with the community for all of us to make lives better is truly an extraordinary gift, and we're just so grateful. Thank you to all the alumni who turned out. Thank you to our special guests, President Howe. Mary Henrich, who I think had to step away to drive to Dallas, of all things. We're just so grateful for all the work, and there's so many ways to participate, even if it's attending a lecture or it's participating in some other way. So please, we encourage you to find out more about what's happening in San Antonio, and thank you so much for showing up tonight. And a final thank you to all of you.